Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. Today I'll be talking about how to get started in real estate with little or no cash. Today I'm going to talk with you about 4 techniques that you possibly can utilize in order to get into real estate without having a lot of cash. The first technique I want to talk about is the primary residence technique. Now, there are 2 ways that technique can be used, in my opinion. The first way is you can purchase a primary residence like I did many years ago. I was a first-time home buyer, so it was a 3% down payment. I qualified for 3% down payment. Now, I got into that home. I lived in that home for 2 years. And the home had appreciated quite a bit in those 2 years. It was in a good growing area of the community. I decided to tap into some of the equity and buy a second home. And then I turned around and I leased for income the first home. And that's how I got into real estate. I did that technique several more times until I got enough cash to be able to buy multiple properties. The second way you can use the primary residence technique is you can buy a duplex. Now, if you qualify for the 3% down first-time home buyers program, you're in good shape. You'll get into the property with just 3% down plus your closing costs. But the neat thing about buying the duplex is you would live in one half of the duplex, and then you would put a tenant in the other half of the duplex. And if you structure it properly, the income that you get from the tenant will be enough to pay for all the expenses and the mortgage payment for the duplex. And then the money that you would have normally spent on housing expense, you would be able to take that money, put it in an account, and save that money, and one day be able to purchase a second property from the savings you would have benefited from by buying the duplex and renting out one half. Now, the second technique is what we call a real estate master lease. And the way I define that and the way I interpret the master lease is you would be able to go to an owner of a property and offer that owner a master lease on that property. Now, if that owner is looking for a guaranteed stream of income or a passive stream of income, it may be appealing to them. Maybe they're ready to step away from the property. Maybe they just don't want to be there day to day anymore. Maybe they want to move to another state, but are not ready to sell the property. You can go to that property owner and do that master lease. Now, what that master lease does for you is it gives you control over the cash flow of that property. Because built into that master lease, you'll be able to sublet that property. So now your lease between you and the property owner will be a certain dollar amount, and then you can go ahead and take that property and sublet it to a tenant for a certain dollar amount. And that spread between the two, you would be able to take that cash and start saving that cash until you saved enough in order to, one, perhaps even purchase that property from the current owner, or you'll have enough cash to be able to hopefully put down a down payment on your own investment property. So that's the second technique, master lease. The third technique would be what I call a real estate finder. Now, what does that mean? Well, a real estate finder, in my interpretation of that phrase, is someone that goes out and finds real estate properties and then takes that information to investors in order to get a fee for finding a property that meets their specifications. That's what a real estate finder is. And you can make money doing that. I know people that have done that. Now, you got to have a certain level and a certain skill set around real estate, but those are things you can learn. But that's a way you can get into real estate, gain some knowledge, learn about the market, and make money, and in hopes of one day saving enough money that you can purchase your own property. The fourth technique is partner with an investor. There are folks out there who have the cash, but they don't necessarily have the time or the expertise to be looking for real estate. What they're looking for is a safe investment that they can get a return on their cash. And that's where you come in. You can go out again, find the property, but instead of just getting a finder's fee, you can actually bring more value and say, hey, look, I want to be a partner with you on this property. I know you're putting up all the cash, but I'm going to be responsible for running the property, dealing with the tenant, evicting tenants, fixing, making repairs to the property, etc. So for that sweat equity, I want to be a partner with you. So those are 4 techniques that you could potentially use to get into real estate with little or no cash. There are a couple of other things that I want to share with you guys as it relates to what do I look for when I'm looking to purchase a piece of property. There are 3 fundamental things that the property or the transaction will need to have for me to be interested in it. The first thing and the most important thing to me is the property has to cash flow. And cash flow is simply the difference between the rental income you get for the property and your expenses and your mortgage payment if you have a mortgage. Whatever's left over after all of that, that's what we call either positive cash flow or negative cash flow. Positive cash flow would be if that number is a positive number. Negative would be if you're losing money on the property. That would be negative cash flow. So that's the first thing that I look for is, does the property cash flow? The second thing I look for is, can I get the best financing options possible on this property? Now, some people can pay cash and not have to worry about financing, but in the world I live in, most people can't just write a check for a real estate property. Most of us are going to put a down payment down, and then we're going to look to find someone to lend us money in order to buy that property or leverage that property. So that's where I look for good debt. Now, what does that mean? That means I look for long-term financing, normally 10 years or better. I don't want a loan that's going to come due before 10 years. Preferably, I want to look for a loan that's going to come due in 30 years. So normally I get 30-year loans. But I understand there are some folks that want 10 or 15, but I wouldn't go lower than a 10-year loan. And the reason being is, normally if we run into a bad time in our economy where we're in a down cycle or a mini recession or something like that, those things can last 2 or 3 years. And if you got a term on your loan that's 3 to 5 years, if we're in a bad downturn and your property is underwater and that loan comes due, there may be a possibility that your lender may call the loan and say, hey, your contract is up, we want you to pay us in full. And you may not have the money to pay them in full. So always look for as long of a term as you can when it comes to your financing. The second thing I look for in good debt is I look for fixed interest rate. And the reason I look for fixed interest rate is because I want to make sure I understand exactly what my bare minimum cash reserves need to be as it relates to this property. And if I have a fixed interest rate, then I know my payment is fixed for a set number of years, and I can calculate, okay, worst case scenario, if the property is offline for 6 months, I'm going to personally have to pay for these loan payments. Okay, since I know exactly what my interest rate is, it's fixed, it's not going to change, my payment is not going to change, then I can put money aside in a reserve account for any unforeseen situations like if a tenant leaves and it takes me a while to replace that tenant, or if I have a major repair I just didn't budget for. Now, the third thing I would look for is purchasing a property in the right location. And what do I mean by the right location? For me, the right location is a location that I'm familiar with and that I know. And more times than not, that's going to be right here in my hometown, right here in the community that I live in. Because I'm from this community, I know the properties, I know all the players, I know the real estate landscape. So it's going to give me a better position to be able to purchase the right property. Also, if something happens to the property, all my resources are here local. If you decide you want to go out and buy a property outside of your geographical location, then I would recommend that you go to that location where you're thinking about buying and spend some time there and get to understand and know the landscape, the real estate landscape in that area. Make sure you put a team together that'll be able to help you and be responsible for the property when you're not there. Outside of that, I would say just buying a location that's growing and doing well. That way you always know that your property is going to be a desirable property. That way you'll always have a tenant in it. And when it's time to exit that property, you'll have some nice appreciation from it being in a growth area of your community. Well, guys, I hope the 4 techniques that I discussed as it relates to getting started in real estate with little or no cash was helpful. I also hope the 3 basic fundamentals that I shared with you that I look for when I'm looking to purchase a property, I hope those were helpful as well. If you're stopping by the channel for the first time, please consider giving me a thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Also, if you have questions, drop me some comments in the comment box. And if you have in-depth questions, you certainly can hit me on Instagram at RichardFain28. But guys, until the next one, keep chasing greatness, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.